all of you being here. Allie, welcome. Lori, welcome. Cheryl, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so today I'm going to talk about, so my name is Dr. Serena Wadhwa. I'm your host for Real Talk the Pendulum. And September is like full of a bunch of different national days, and it's always challenging, and I use that word very rarely, always. However, when it comes to selecting what to talk about, it's challenging to decide what to talk about. So I tried to choose different ones every time the months come around. So in September, I'll be talking about Suicide Prevention and Recovery Month. And then we'll see what October brings when it gets here. But those are the dates for October. There's 3 of them. So that's going to be a very, very auspicious month in October, because when do you get 3 podcasts in 1 month? Exciting. So today's topic is going to be about suicide prevention. And, I was thinking about how to bridge this kind of conversation. And, one of the things that came to mind as I was putting this together was kind of talking about, why don't we talk about what we need to talk about kind of things. There's lots of times where either we ourselves are struggling with something that we want to talk about and we don't know how to talk about it or to talk about it, or maybe we see other people struggling with something and we don't talk about it with them. And so there's, a few different reasons that we just don't talk about things that need to be talked about. And so these are kind of like 5 of the more general umbrella categories of, reasons that we just don't talk about what we need to talk about. And so I want to just kind of go through this and, kind of explore a little bit about some of the benefits that these reasons provide and some of the costs that they provide and the risks, of course, and normalize that, these are things that happen for a lot of people, and also how they can impact mental health, how they can impact other types of maladaptive ways of coping, or even preventing healing from occurring. And so the first reason that we don't talk about what we need to talk about is vulnerability risks, and it's always, and again, there's that word again, always. It's always vulnerable, right? People feel vulnerable. We all feel vulnerable when we talk about things that seem very risky, because there's that fear of judgment. We risk feeling shame. We risk being rejected by people for having these thoughts or these feelings about things. And there's always that increased risk of feeling emotional pain or physical pain or existential pain, the experience of being human. And so one of the reasons that people may not talk about or even approach other people when they see somebody in pain is because of that. They don't want to be rejected. They don't want to feel shame. They don't want to be judged. Nobody likes to be judged. And so recognizing that if this is like one of those reasons that's coming up is this exposure of being vulnerable or of being human that is coming up, that there are ways to move through that. A second reason that we don't talk about what we need to talk about, I talk about it like I'm not a person either when I say people. But I am in that category too. So I want to make sure that I include myself, is that avoidance itself, like just not talking about something, it does provide benefits. I mean, there is temporary relief when we just don't talk about something, right? And there is this kind of perception or an illusion that whatever it is that we're not talking about may just kind of go away on its own. And that may be, magical thinking, and it's not uncommon for us to experience that. And in fact, as kids, we engage in that kind of primary thinking a lot, because that's part of our developmental process, by the way, is this magical kind of thinking. And if you remember as like kids, you had that kind of magical thinking. That is part of development. And if you remember, like, when you play like peekaboo with babies, right? Like just that kind of glee and delight that they experience when they see you again after you like hide behind something or even hide behind your own hands. Like it is that kind of illusion that I'm talking about. There is this kind of relief or like, oh, out of sight, out of mind, out of sight, it just doesn't exist kind of a thing. And so avoidance does provide that. And it also provides that we just don't have to deal with it. If there is this kind of idea or concept or belief that if I avoid it, or it could be a coping mechanism, or it could be a false hope of just avoiding it. I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to carry the weight of it. I don't have to deal with all the responsibility of what this is going to mean, because that could be very heavy too. And sometimes it's worth the sacrifice of not dealing with that. And that's fine too. I mean, temporary relief is temporary relief. And then another reason that the other benefit that avoidance sometimes provides people is detachment. It just allows this kind of temporary detachment. And the cost of this, and sometimes even the risk of this too, is that at some point in time, it can also, and I've had, when I work with clients, sometimes this happens where it lends itself into this experience of this kind of numbing, where when a person is not talking about things that may be painful because they don't want to deal or they're avoiding this pain, it lends to then not experiencing even the good things, so there's this kind of more global detachment that occurs. And that's part of the risk of avoidance, right? Is that when we're avoiding negative things, we subsequently are also avoiding all the positive things that can come with that, which really sucks if you think about it. But however, that's the way that humans are built. And I mean, that's how we're built. And so that's one of the reasons we don't talk about what we need to talk about. And a third, kind of category about why we may not talk about things that we need to talk about is because we don't know how to talk about it. Like, how do you actually talk about some of these things that are very taboo? Whether it be in your family, whether it be in your community, whether it be in a cultural framework or a spiritual framework or religious framework, or having the skill to how do I go about wording this or finding the words to describe what I'm experiencing when I don't even know what I'm experiencing? And I'm not even sure what's going on. And I don't even know if someone else is going to understand what I'm experiencing. And so, running that risk of not knowing how to identify what's going on or expressing it or communicating it with somebody else, that's a skill set. And so we may not talk about what we need to talk about because we don't know how to do that. And skills are something that can be developed. It is just it's finding the resources to help develop those skills. And again, there's one reason that counseling and psychoeducation groups and therapy can be very useful when you find the right fit. And oftentimes, you can even ask, if you're looking for a specific type of skill development or a type of way of wanting to work on some of these things, that you can ask providers about, this is specifically what I want to work on. Is this something that you are able to provide? That's totally okay to do. Another reason that we don't talk about what we need to talk about, and I kind of mentioned this too, is, the social cultural conditioning. Sometimes it's just not the norm to talk about something, or the perception of being an outsider. As human beings, we want to belong. That is one of the 5 primary needs as identified by 2 Western psychologists. And so Maslow's hierarchy of needs, some of you may have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The second one is belonging, being included. I think it's the second one, belonging, being included in a group. And so it is, a lot of times people will go against, what feels right for them in order to fit into a group because they don't want to be excluded from the group. Because a group actually does provide a lot of benefits. There is benefits to having a community. There are benefits to having other people around you. There are not many things that one can do on their own necessarily. And so people may weigh that unconsciously, subconsciously, consciously, and yet at the same time, just recognizing that there is this kind of, I'm not going to talk about this because I don't want people to exclude me. I don't want to be bullied about this because a lot of times that can happen too, especially in what is it, like high school, junior high, middle school, depending on the grade and stuff like that. C is being talked about. Gossip is one of the other things, and I'm not talking about like out of concern when people are saying so and so is going through a hard time and what can we do? I'm talking more about like when people are talking around the cooler, for example, and just talking about people. That's a very different kind of talking. But being talked about is that people, may not want to talk about what they need to talk about because they don't want to, we don't want to be gossiped about. And oftentimes we may not know who we could trust and who we cannot trust. And then of course, privacy and image, a lot of times it's about preserving what we perceive as being private and what we perceive as being part of an image that either we have cultivated or has been cultivated on our behalf by whatever may have preceded us. And so that's another kind of umbrella that probably has a lot more layers to it, but those are more of the uh, prominent types of things that come about from that. And then this last category is about these outcomes. What happens when I do talk about what I need to talk about? And for some people, it's the benefits. I may not talk about it because of the benefits. That can be very scary for people that, it's actually going to heal or it's actually going to help me. And I don't know what that's going to look like. And so I am more afraid of that than what I'm already going through. So, it's kind of like most people, and, I've gone through this too. You're more comfortable with what you know than what you don't know. And so stepping into the unknown, it's very scary because you have no kind of experience to navigate what's going to happen. And therefore, you don't really know if you're going to be able to handle it. And yet part of, the evolving, part of, harmonizing that pendulum is about being able to take comfort in your own confidence and competency in your own skills and your own abilities. And so being able to find some of that balance is important. The risks, some people have talked about how outcomes have led to different risks. They've risked different things as a result, or they have encountered risks as a result that they had to face. And so that was something that also prevented them from talking about other things that they needed to talk about. What it costs, what it might cost them. Sometimes what I have people do is, whenever there is like an issue or something that's going on for them that they have not talked about with other people and they may bring to therapy or, I'll ask them about that and I'll go through a cost risk benefits analysis with them. And we'll go through each one of those things and really just explore, do kind of more of a deep dive into that and explore what these things mean and the different relationship that they have with these different parts and pieces to really fully understand how these different components fit into this this central issue for them. And then previous experience, we build a lot of what we do based on past experience. And that is part of what, you know, part of what sometimes hinders us from moving forward and evolving is that oftentimes we allow previous experience to determine our future experience. And so rather than just determining future experience by trying something new, by experimenting and seeing what's going to happen, and I'm not talking about like, risky kind of behavior or things that you may know are going to put you in a certain position, but things that you may not necessarily have that are not going to be detrimental necessarily to your health or well-being. The goal is safety and security, of course, and also healing and well-being in all of that. And so those are different reasons that as humans, we don't talk about what we need to talk about. And so I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts about any of these reasons or has want to add to it. I'm sure there's other reasons that we don't talk about what we need to talk about, but I'm curious what you all may want to share.
I just want to say this is a lot of very good information, also interesting, diverse, and oh my gosh, yeah, I'm kind of soaking it all in, Serena.
Processing it through.
It's all of it is meaningful, really.
It's a lot to see on one screen that, oh, these are the reasons why I don't talk about
I know.
why I don't.
It is. It's like, oh my gosh. And unfortunately, there are so many relatable topics here.
Yes, there
It's
are a lot.
a little bit, I have to say, a little bit scary because they
Yeah.
are so relatable. And,
They are related. And
yeah,
yes, and I appreciate you sharing that because it's not uncommon
yeah,
that, right? That we
yep,
as human beings, that these are the reasons we
mm,
don't talk about things that we need to talk about. And the fact that, we have our own, unique, layers to these different categories, and yet at the same time, the common experiences because they fit
right,
into these experiences.
right. Which is why so many people can relate to it. It's,
Yes.
sometimes a little disconcerting to know
Yeah.
that you're relating to a lot of these. If
Yeah.
if you can admit to it, which I can do behind the safety of of this format here.
Right. Well, it's easier behind the screen. Absolutely. Of course. Well, and it gives you a little bit of comfort to know that, yes, okay. And then knowing that you have this information, it also gives you the opportunity to make a decision about what to do with it too,
Yes.
right? Because it's
Right.
just recognizing that this is normal and that
Mhm.
these are reasons that we don't talk about things that we need
Right.
to talk about.
Yes. And I just want to say it personally is very helpful to see all of these listed. And, it's one thing maybe to have a fleeting thought about this or that, but to actually see them is very meaningful to me. And I just want to thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Thank you for sharing that. Mhm. Anyone else want to share a comment or a thought that they have about these reasons that we do not talk about what we need to talk about? All right. So, and the reason why I bring this up is in talking about suicide prevention, because we often don't talk about suicide. And, statistically speaking, suicide is a lot more common than people would like to admit. It is the 11th leading cause of death. Firearms do tend to be the leading cause or leading method of death by suicide. And approximately 49,000 people died by suicide in 2023. So if you live in Illinois and you're watching this, that's the population of Downers Grove or Plainfield, Illinois, to give you kind of a representation of how many people that actually is, which is, quite a bit. I mean, that's a pretty decent size town, both of these. And so whatever state you might be in that you're watching this, if you were to kind of just Google a town that has this many amount of people, that will give you a representation of what that looks like. And that is like a really, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like oh my, sombering way to recognize how many people actually die by suicide in 2023, and why it makes it so important to talk about things that we don't talk about. And so, September is Suicide Prevention Month, and SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration, um, does have these prevention toolkits. And so that's the website that you can go to. You can put media on, Facebook if you're on Facebook, or Instagram, on your website, anything like that. But these are the things that they talk about that are really important when it comes to prevention. One is normalize help seeking. And that's really the reason why I put in there first, why don't we talk about the things that we don't talk about? Because in order for us to talk about what we need to talk about, we need to normalize that it's okay to seek help, and to talk about these things that we don't talk about. Because healing is going to look different for everybody. And healing can happen when it is done and given in a way that optimizes a person's own individualized way of healing. And oftentimes that's not what happens for people. It's kind of like this cookie cutter approach, or it's kind of like this, you will do this in order to feel better. And that doesn't work for everybody. People heal in their own capacity, and they need their own space to do that. And in order to facilitate, it is about, being able to be present and listening to how people need to get that healing in motion. It is about going beyond crisis intervention. When a person is expressing or feeling suicidal, it is not just about calling 911 or, getting them help right away. It's also about going beyond that. It's about really just developing presence with a person, which means that you are staying present with the person. You're not like handing them off to somebody else and demonstrating that, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with this kind of thing. That's part of reasons that people don't want to seek help, is because it can sometimes feel very dismissive. And I'm teaching a crisis intervention class right now too. And these are some of the things that we talk about in crisis intervention class, is that when crisis happens for people, it is about being authentic and about being present with the person, because it could be very scary, to be that person who is with somebody who's in crisis. And yet at the same time, you are providing support for this individual who is seeking no other option but to take their life, to find relief. And the key is that this person wants to find relief. And so, it's not about like, telling them everything is going to be all right. It's not about telling them that, their problems are not that big, because that just minimizes whatever it is that they're experiencing. It really is about listening, which is beyond crisis intervention, and really about hearing just, how much pain they may be in, because they may not find a solution. And they may not see a solution because they may have tried things. They may not know what's out there. Oftentimes people don't know about resources that exist. And so being able to go beyond crisis intervention, perhaps help them or find somebody who knows more about resources, can also be a vehicle for normalizing help seeking and being able to talk about what needs to be talked about. Cultivating awareness about effective treatments, just recognizing that there are treatments that are available that work. And a lot of people do not know about effective treatments for when people are experiencing suicide or want to end their life, that there are treatments for this. It's not just medication, it's also different psychotherapy approaches. It can be trauma-informed care that can work. like EMDR, like narrative therapy, accelerated rapid therapy. I think it's resolution therapy. There's a few other DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's all different effective kinds of therapies that exist out there. And again, it's about individualizing them for the person. Know the warning signs. I'm going to go over that in just a second, and then some resources too as well. And I know we're going to be out of time here in a minute because we started a couple minutes late. But so normalizing help seeking and healing, again, just recognizing the human experience. There is no manual for the human experience. It would be great if whenever we're born, we get this manual that says, here is how to be human. But there is nothing like that. Change does require risk, and it involves courage, strength, faith, and hope, whatever faith looks like for an individual. And oftentimes it's just recognizing that a person is being courageous by just expressing the fact that they feel hopeless, because that's a very hard thing to express for people. And so even just acknowledging that, it takes a lot of courage to admit that that's how vulnerable you feel right now, can be helpful because you are seeing the person in their experience. Who could be a role model, for you to help normalize and for this person builds on previous experiences of success. This could be something that you work with. Attend meetings to hear about other people's experiences of healing. For example, when I work with students who take substance use classes, I have them go to open recovery group meetings so that they can hear stories about people who heal from substance use disorders, who are in recovery, and what that experience is like. And so they recognize that healing does happen. Learn about the facts. Facts are one way that really help harmonize the pendulum. So whatever facts need to be found is you seek resources for those. Whatever the issue is, you learn about it. So for example, if a person doesn't feel they have any options or resources for, maybe they're feeling depression or maybe they're feeling anxiety, then you learn about the facts about depression and anxiety and see what options are out there. And this is something that you can do with somebody. And again, of course, this is not saying that this is a Band-Aid approach. It is about, if a person is suicidal and, obviously is going to be taking their life in the moment, you call 911 because that is, what you do. But there are other options that are available, so it's not as evasive, so to speak. So beyond crisis intervention, being present, I was talking about this before. This is the heart chakra, by the way. So again, this is where you're not struck by somebody who is wanting to die by suicide. Your experience, your perception is not being affected by that. So you could be authentic and be present for this individual. Providing support to this person. What does it look like for them? Listening and validating, genuine connection with another human being who is suffering. This is compassion. I've talked about this before. It's the desire to want to relieve this. Warning signs of suicide. This is the fifth chakra. This is about communication. Talking about wanting to end their life passively or actively. So these are things to look out for if a person is expressing feeling empty, hopeless, no reason to live. Maybe they're withdrawing from other people or they're disengaged from things. They're giving away things or possessions. Maybe they express a sudden expression of relief. They've been in turmoil for a while and all of a sudden it's like the exact opposite of, and you notice this. This is something to talk about and ask them about and to see what's going on. And then anything, behavior-wise, just unusual behavior, sleep patterns, spending money, eating patterns, things like that. Just things that seem out of character for the person you're looking at as well. And so there are a lot of variety of resources. Call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, 988, that is still active. You can also chat online. So you can go online and put this 988lifeline.org in, and you could chat with a live person right away. Call 911 if it's life-threatening. There is a treatment.gov where you can find treatment right away as well in your state. This is a national directory. The Chicago Department of Health can also be helpful if you live in Chicago or surrounding suburbs. And so you can even look at your local health department for resources, your local crisis lines, or your local emergency room. Those are all places that you can find resources, help, or people to talk with about wanting to end your life or knowing someone who wants to end their life. So that is about suicide prevention and reasons that we don't talk about things that we need to talk about. And I appreciate you staying on a few minutes over. I don't know if anybody has any closing comments before we end. All right. Well, I thank everybody for being here and spending a few extra minutes with me. I'm sorry I started late. Next time that we meet, we're going to talk about Recovery Month, and we will go from there. Have a good rest of your evening, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Serena.
Thank you.